So the good news is, and it really is actually good news, for all those studying the knowledge or thinking of doing the knowledge, is that the knowledge just got better and fairer. Is it easier? Well, not in terms of the standard you need to reach, but it is easier in terms of the stress-induced pressure that comes with being redlined back a whole stage. So in that sense, it is easier. And on the whole, the response from most people has been positive. The changes that have been announced and which are in effect immediately are to redlining and to the type of questions you can be asked and on what stage they can be asked. Now, we'll cover those aspects in detail throughout this video, and I will explain how they work positively and how the examiners, if they wish, can interpret them negatively, as they've done so in the past. I'll also explain one extremely important point regarding setting and leaving on the left for stages 3 and 4, 56s and 28s. These changes will mean that the student's mindset when being redlined will go from what a disaster to oh well, c'est la vie, which is a much better mindset. And historically, this second red line has been a monumental pressure to burden anyone with when they're studying so hard. One piece of feedback I got was from someone claimed that only the lazy get redlined and only those who are not studying hard lose points for hesitation. So comments like this are not helpful and not a factual perspective on the reasons behind red lines and hesitation. An ex-examiner openly deducts points for hesitation on all their appearances for no reason. So how can it be concluded that all students are not studying hard enough? I recently discussed this with a current examiner, and their rule of thumb was you should never deduct points for hesitation if it causes the candidate to fall below 24 points, which would mean they would fail that appearance. And in fairness to the ex-examiner, they were operating very close to that kind of idea too. And I'd like to see that made a rule, as it would make things much fairer. I have personal experience of seeing too many talented and hardworking students being redlined undeservedly, and they were most certainly not lazy. So in regard to these improvements, this will be, I expect, two of many changes that will be implemented over the coming year. I think a little historical context may help some of you understand that this change in no way waters down or lowers the standard of candidates. In fact, the hope and evidence is that it will do the opposite. When the red line system was introduced, along with the reduction of the Blue Book runs from 400 runs to 320, as well as a grading system that graded people from AA, A, B, C, D, and E. Now, E and AA were subsequently done away with, but the industry was in uproar about it being the quickie knowledge. Now, this system has been in place for 2 decades, and it sadly achieved 3 things. It made the knowledge take longer. It caused a gradual and steady decline in applicants, and it lowered the overall standard of those coming through. The standard of students coming through under this system is lower now than it was 20 years ago. Many will interpret these improvements as a reduction in standard and will fight any change regardless, without understanding the bigger picture. Catchphrases like quality over quantity are meaningless when there is no quantity to create any quality. So if your interpretation is that these improved changes are going to diminish quality, you would be absolutely wrong. Since the introduction of the new 320 runs, the standard of the students has continuously and progressively declined regardless. And this decline is wholly due to the way we have since been testing and punishing people who study. Prior to the introduction of the 320 runs, standards were considerably higher amongst knowledge students. The grading system and the erratic inconsistency from examiners has meant more and more sensible, intelligent, and capable applicants have been concluding that the whole process is just not worth their time. So not only has the pool of applicants become so incredibly small, it's also attracting less and less professional type people, creating less competition, which means that the current students studying the knowledge are not seeing and experiencing any other students who in the past were responsible for raising the bar to such an incredibly high standard. More and more people began to do the knowledge via Google, and more people do the knowledge in a car, as well as looking for points physically less and less. I'm sure that most of you have noticed that previously a very common sight of a knowledge student on a scooter is now extremely rare. A punishment system of testing died out with the Victorians. Taking away that punishment does not diminish the standard one iota. It allows people to now study and persist with the knowledge without the fear and threat of going backwards. Now, technically, you can still go backwards, but it will only be in extreme cases where the student hasn't managed to acquire 12 points on their current level in the designated time spans, which I've placed on the screen now. And even then, they will be given a chance to put their case and discuss it with the examiner as to what is the best course of action for them at that point in time. Now, another comment I saw was someone claiming that redlining is the thing that separates us from cab drivers around the world, which is quite simply an absurdity. What makes us the most qualified cab drivers in the world is run number 161. By the time you complete run 161, you are more qualified than any taxi driver in any country in any city. And we all know that run 161 is a very small percentage of our learning process. So if you are arguing, as this person is with this tweet, that redlining is what separates us from the rest of the world's cab drivers, we'd have to remove 90% of it or more for the process to bring it into parity with other major cities. The other aspect that's been improved is the type of question you can be asked. So prior to this change, it was possible for an examiner to ask technical questions or runs with restrictions on any level to any student. This type of question is one that contains extra requirements other than just going from A to B, such as avoiding traffic lights. This type of question involves using no traffic lights, for instance. It's all very interesting as an exercise, but not entirely relevant or purposeful to the job that we do. This also caused a lot of confusion as it took further explanation to exclude pelican and puffin crossing lights, which if you didn't exclude them, the questions became impossible to answer. The same can be said for asking students to leave a building on the left when there is absolutely no reason to, forcing a turnaround that technically isn't needed. A rule was implemented that the examiners should specify that a point should be left on the left only or set on the left only so that the student was not having to judge the examiner's opinion on ambiguous settings of points. The examiners immediately took that rule and made it apply to every single point regardless of need, creating endless and unpredictable turnarounds for any possible question. So some of you will argue that it forces you to learn extra roads. That's fine. Then just ask those roads as questions and we can go and look at them. But don't just ask them once. Ask them every day for a few weeks. Students soon learn them. Another aspect of bending the rules with technical questions involves multiple drops, which were a backhanded way of increasing your questions from 4 to 8 per appearance. The rules specified you will be asked 4 questions. The examiners then added in multiple destinations within one question, effectively making it 2 questions. So the improvement to questions is a good one, but there is still a way that the examiners can use the one technical question on stage 5 to create problems. If you are not going to repeat the question over several appearances, then the question will be, in most cases, impossible to answer. If you do repeat the technical question, then it allows students to practice and learn the answer. And here it seems many people would argue that you should not be able to practice the question, but should have the power to deduct all answers on the fly. And that is absolutely unrealistic. Now, with this 4th question, if they make it impossible to answer and do not repeat it, then you are going to need to score 24 points from just 3 questions. Effectively meaning you must not score less than 8 per question, otherwise you will fail. So in conclusion, bringing back much of the knowledge as it was 20 years ago would be a great move and contribute greatly to saving it. As it is, these improvements that have been introduced on the 22nd of February 2022 are going to help immensely in a twofold way. They are going to prevent students from giving up, and they are going to entice more people to start. From now on, when you notify TfL that you're ready to start being tested by applying for the written exam, also known as the MAP test, and subsequently start appearances, and you receive 4 straight Ds, you have effectively lost nothing but gained invaluable experience. You should only be asked 4 questions per appearance, but please note this, as it is really important. The point may still need to be left on the left or set on the left only on stages 3 and 4, 56s and 28s, as that is the only physical way to leave or set that specific point. So it does not mean you won't need turnarounds on these levels. For example, they can still ask Madame Tussauds or Bermondsey Station on any level and you must leave on the left only. But if the point is in an ambiguous position, you are more than permitted to ask the examiner for clarification. A classic example would be something like Essex Road Station, which many students would turn around. But for the record, Essex Road Station does not need a turnaround and can be left and set on the right. When points are blocked by railings or in front of zebra crossings, the set down would be beyond that point to give passengers access to the pavement. The examiner should then clarify what their expectations are for that point so that when asking the question, there's no ambiguity. They will not be able to ask you to set or leave on the left for points that do not require it until you are on stage 5, which is also known as 21s, and they will only be able to ask you one question of this type per appearance. So don't be complacent. They can still ask you points that are compulsory leave on the left only, and obviously leave on the right only in one-way streets, on all levels of testing. All questions prior to stage 5 should be from A to B without any added restrictions or requirements other than those which are compulsory. Any questions? Let me know in the comments below. In terms of the work out there for taxi drivers, things are looking good now. And in terms of people doing or thinking of starting the knowledge, things most certainly have just got better and fairer. And the high standard of training for the knowledge is always going to be maintained.